Kia ora everyone, welcome to another map video, and in this video I would like to talk to you about New Zealand, but also some of the facts that I learned about New Zealand when I studied here for my master's degree. So I'm just going to start with reminding you what is New Zealand and how does it look like, and then I will move forward to discuss some of the interesting aspects of New Zealand wildlife. Alright, so first of all, here is the map of New Zealand, and you can see that there are three main islands. The North Island and the South Island, and the third one is Stewart Island. Of course, there are also Chatham Islands and lots of islands in here, and those islands all together comprise New Zealand. But two main islands, Northern and Southern, are where the most population of New Zealand is concentrated. And when I came to New Zealand, I actually landed in Auckland, just in here, and this is where I stayed for a couple of days. And then from Auckland I took a boat to another little island just somewhere around here in Auckland Harbour. I spent on that island 1 week studying New Zealand birds, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on. But then from Auckland I moved to here, Palmerston North. This was the city where I felt like home for the first time in New Zealand, because I studied there and I met really good people who helped me throughout all 6 years that we lived here. I met my best friends in this city. From Palmerston North, there is quite a way here to the coast, you see. It's about 40 kilometers, so it's not too far, but it is a beautiful beach. And here in this area and all around here, the beaches have black sand. And black sand is not just black, but it has this very gorgeous golden glow. So beaches from this side are black, and going further to here, gray, and beaches on this side and here are white and stone. I lived in this city in Palmerston North for 6 years until we decided to move to the South Island of New Zealand. The biggest city on the North Island is Auckland, and the capital of New Zealand is located on the North Island too, and it is Wellington, just right here. So when we decided to move, we drove from Palmerston North to Wellington, and we took a ferry. So we had our four-wheel drive car with a big trailer, and we boarded the ferry and we went across the Cook Strait. This is, you see, a Cook Strait that goes between two islands, and the Tasman Sea is connected with the South Pacific Ocean through this Cook Strait. So we had to cross it, and we didn't cross it just like that, but we crossed it to the town that is called Picton, and we had to go through all of those little passages, all of those little ones, and this is called Marlborough Sounds. It is so beautiful. On a sunny day, the water is turquoise and the sand is bright yellow. This is the most beautiful part of New Zealand. No, not the most, but one of the most beautiful parts of New Zealand. And when you travel in a ferry, you can actually go outside and observe all those little islands that you are passing in the ferry. And then we arrived to Picton. We drove from Picton all the way to Nelson, where we were staying. So the roads there are very windy, and with the trailer it was a bit of a mission, because the trailer was heavy and the car was old. But we managed it, though the car didn't really make it. We had to sell it after this trip. Anyway, we arrived into Nelson, where we had our rented house, and we stayed in Nelson for several years after that. Nelson is a very beautiful little town that is located very close to 3 national parks out here, and of course Marlborough Sounds and beautiful ranges, mountain ranges that you can go to, you can hike, you can drive through, and even skiing in winter. The biggest city on the South Island is Christchurch, and you probably heard of a big earthquake and even several earthquakes that happened in Christchurch that devastated the city, and many people after that disaster moved to Nelson, and they stayed after that disaster in Nelson and made Nelson their home. So in Nelson there are a lot of people from Christchurch now. Some of them are of course going back, but many of them staying because of the proximity that Nelson provides to all the natural wonders around. And Nelson is a really interesting area because it has national parks with native birds in them. And that is what I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about. When I studied in Palmerston North, my study subject was population of rare birds called hihi or stitchbird. And I had to go to this little town, Wanganui, where they had a sanctuary to study those birds, but I didn't actually study the birds themselves. I studied the population dynamics of those birds. And why it is so interesting? It is because all of those birds in this sanctuary arrived to the sanctuary from that little island that I spent my first week on studying those birds. Now I want to show you another map that I developed for my master thesis that will explain the translocation of the birds to different places around North Island. Let me show you my master thesis book. Here it is. You see that it has a beautiful green hardcover and golden letters. So, for my thesis, I did a study on population dynamics and decision making about those populations. But for now, I only wanted to show you a map that is in this book to explain you a little bit better what is happening with birds in New Zealand. I actually have a little bookmark here, so I'm just going to open it for you. And here you can see another map of North Island. And this time I'm going to take another sharper pencil, and we'll show you the outline of the North Island. This is the North Island. And in this map I have 3 notation. N means natural population of hihi birds, T translocation site, and M population supported by management, which means that the population of birds that cannot survive on their own and they need people to support this population at all times. I just realized that I haven't shown you the bird, so maybe in my book I can find a picture of hihi bird so you can understand what am I talking about. Let me see if I can find it for you. I remember on Tiri Tiri Matangi Island I did a picture of that bird. And here it is. I'll just put my bookmark back. So, I hope that you can see this bird, but may not be the best picture as I took it myself. So basically this bird is the size of a sparrow, but it has curved beak, as you can see here on the picture, because they don't eat the same thing that sparrows do. This curved beak is a very good tool to extract nectar. And this is what they usually do. They drink nectar of native New Zealand flowers. And some of you who know birds may have guessed that this is a male. The bright colors are always, not always, but quite often attributed to male birds. Of course, sometimes males and females have the same colors. However, in this bird we have distinction between females and males. This yellow feathers and dark black, and there should be a little bit of white in here, but it's not visible. You can see that each leg has a little band, like a bracelet. And normally those bands serve as identification of the bird. The combination of colors is different on each bird, and this is how the researchers can understand which exactly bird it is. They have 4 bands. This one specifically has green and orange, and I think it's pink and green again. So in my report, if I saw this bird in my binocular, I would report a male, and then I would read first. I don't actually remember now which leg you read first, because it was maybe 8 years ago when I did my study, but I think you report first as we read from left to right, so you report the left leg first, and so it would be P, G, G, O, which means pink, green, green, orange. And I would record this bird as present in that moment. So now you know how the bird look like. Maybe I have a female here as well. No, unfortunately I don't. But anyway, female looks more like sparrow, quite brown and not very noticeable. Alright, so as I told you before, there are 3 notations here: natural, translocation, and population supported by management. When Europeans came to New Zealand about 200 years ago, unfortunately they destroyed quite a lot of the environment by bringing different viruses, predators that hunt on native birds, and they destroyed mature trees that birds used for nesting. Eventually, after 100 years of populating this land, Europeans destroyed quite a lot of birds' population, and hihi was one of them. So eventually the population remained only on one of the remote islands that is not even shown here. Little Barrier Island was another island where hihi population remained, and this is marked as N, meaning that that was a natural population. On this little island, population can survive by itself and it can thrive. Everywhere else where the hihi bird used to be, they disappeared, and the entire island didn't have a single bird. And what researchers propose to do is they propose to translocate. This is where we have this word translocation. Some of the birds into another island and help them to survive. That's what they did. Several birds from this island were taken on a plane and put in this island, Tiri Matangi Island. Here on this island I spent my first week in New Zealand. It is a small island, very small, but it is predator-free, which means there are no introduced predators in here. Only native predators, that is possibly birds of prey like falcons and owls. And on this island, researchers created a management program. This is why we have here T and M, which means that this population here translocated, but it also cannot survive by itself. It needs people to manage it. In this specific case, what it means is that researchers provide food and shelter for the birds to breed. They provide special feeders and they provide special food for the bird. Why is it this way? Well, because this little island was also destroyed by people, and it doesn't have those trees that produce nectar for those birds. It doesn't have the mature trees that have cavities for those birds to build nests. But it also doesn't have predators, which means that birds can reproduce and can survive. The population on this island is thriving, and then researchers propose to move some birds from here to other areas in North Island. And at the time I was writing this research paper, there were 1, 2, 3, 4 introduction made throughout North Island of those hihi birds. First of all, the birds were introduced to this sanctuary, Mountain Mangatotari. This is a sanctuary in the main island, and it is fenced, which means that predators like cats and rats and stoats cannot get in. They put a special fence around this piece of bush to make sure that the birds can survive. But you can see that this letter M means that people still need to help those birds to survive. They still provide food and shelter. And they constantly monitor the fence to make sure that there are no holes, there are no damages, and no predators can come inside to damage the birds and the eggs. After this, the population of birds, again from this little island, were introduced to Kapiti Island. It's another little beautiful island off the coast of Paraparaumu, and then to Eco Sanctuary Zealandia in Wellington and Bushie Park next to Wanganui. Bushie Park was, at the time of writing this book, the recent site where I had to support this population, and I had to track the birds and see what birds survived and how they reproduce. So for my book, for my research, I tracked the population of hihi birds, and I analyzed the population dynamics and projected into the future the likelihood of survival of this population, and also we had a panel of experts who provided their opinion on what might help this population to live in this sanctuary. I will try to see if there is a picture of a female bird in my book. If I won't find the picture, I will maybe show you it next time, and we'll talk more precisely about the population dynamics and the graphs that we were able to project. We used a very interesting software to do this, and I learned a lot about statistics and different methods of statistics, like Bayesian statistic, for example. And it was very interesting to learn all of that, because I never learned that in my university back home, and it was so interesting how you can actually track and foresee in the future. I couldn't find the female, but what I can show you is another map, and this time this is the map of Bushie Park. And so you can see that this green line represents the fence. This nature reserve was also surrounded by a protective fence to make sure that this sanctuary is predator free, so no one can enter this fence. This fence protects from rats and cats and stoats and weasels and some other predators. But there are still predators that are native, like falcons and owls, that still can hurt the birds, the eggs and chicks. However, this is a part of the natural process, so we only keep away predators that are not normally part of New Zealand's environment. And those little dots are the tracking stations to understand whether predators entered. They have special tunnels, and predator goes into tunnel, it steps on ink, and then tip through the tunnel, goes out, and then researcher is able to see by the footprints what kind of animal it was and whether it's supposed to be here or not. Most likely not, because in New Zealand there are no mammals by default, except bats, but bats wouldn't go on the ground doing tip in the tunnel. And those little dots, each of them represent this little tunnel, and researchers every day or maybe every second day go climb the hills, go through the bush and the supplejack, and go and check those tracking tunnels. Those blue lines are the rivers, and those dots represent the tunnels. I was also going along those lines to check for hihi birds. I was going through those lines, climbing the hills, and listening carefully for the birds' sounds. When I hear the sound, I stop, and then I take my binocular out and I would look around for the bird. When I see the bird, I try to look for the identification marks, for the rings on their feet, and try to record it as soon as possible. So here I explained to you a little bit about New Zealand nature and conservation in New Zealand. I want to show you one more time this map to tell you one more thing. Hihi bird, they always were only on the North Island. They never went to South Island. So this is a bird, we call it native to North Island. We call it endemic because it only can be seen in this area. Never you find these birds in any other countries on Earth. But there are so many other birds and sanctuaries that doing exactly the same thing, translocating the birds to different places, and sometimes even to South Island as well, to maintain the population alive and to restore the biodiversity of New Zealand, and to make sure that the ecosystem is working. An ecosystem is working only when all the pieces of the puzzles are there in place. If one piece missing, everything else suffers. So that's why we try to restore it as much as we can, and we protect some of the coolest natural wonders on the planet. Here you go, everyone. This was a little bit educational video for you, but I hope you still found it relaxing and will be able to fall asleep and sleep very well and have beautiful, relaxing dreams. Have a wonderful, wonderful time.